Welcome into the Cool Grandpa podcast. I'm excited to have you here. I want to remind you that Grandparents Week is starting September 8th through the 14th. This is a great opportunity for you to sign up for free to attend some of the workshops as well as some of the materials that are created especially for grandparents to help strengthen that relationship we have with our adult children as well as with our grandchildren. So be sure to check out the show notes, and I'll have a link down below so that you can sign up for your free chair with Grandparents Academy's Grandparents Week. I also want to remind you that I've got a grandfather coaching program that is now available. This is a great program that is set up to really work with new grandfathers that might have some young grandchildren or maybe are becoming a first-time grandfather. We're going to go over your particular circumstances. We're going to talk about some of the things that are concerning to you and how we can address those and bring to bear over 200 hours that I have of studying, reading, and talking to grandfathers about what makes their relationship special. Now, next week, I'm going to have a one-on-one conversation because it will be the 1st of August when the next podcast comes out. And I'm going to break down the week that I had working at the scout camp where I was working with teens and people in their early 20s. You're going to be surprised to learn some of the lessons that I was able to take away from that and how we can use those lessons to really strengthen our relationships with our grandchildren who might be in those teenage years. So this is going to be a great opportunity for you to check in. And maybe some of these are lessons that you already know, but I think some of these are going to be some eye openers for maybe some of us older grandparents. Now, this week's guest is Jim Padilla. Now, Jim is a really awesome sales coach and has some awesome programs where he really helps companies build up their revenue streams so that they can be a company of significance, not just monetarily, but significance in terms of their impact on the families of the employees that they have, as well as within their communities. So this is a great conversation that Jim's going to share with us about his experience growing up without a lot of positive male role models around and how he was able to be intentional and turn those negative experiences into positive experiences. So, hey, without further ado, let's jump into this conversation with Jim. Hi, Jim. Welcome to the Cool Grandpa podcast. I'm excited to have you on.
Excited to be here. Really looking forward to it.
Now, I'd love for you to give us a little bit of a background, where you grew up, what your family life is like, and then we'll lead into that next question that I ask every single grandfather.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey because being a grandpa is not something that I ever planned on. My wife and I, we're actually celebrating 25 years married this year, together for 30. And we've raised 3 amazing daughters who have, we've got five grandkids between them and the 6th one coming. We just found out at Easter we have a December baby coming, so it'll be our 6th. We'll have one every year. We'll have 6 from 6 and under. So it's pretty cool, exciting, and it's one of those things that I never thought that I would even. It's just not something I ever thought about. I never thought I would have kids until I had them. And I was like, oh, this is great. But now it's grandkids. I never spent any time thinking about being a grandparent. But now that we have them, it's amazing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And the question I love asking grandfathers is take us back to that time when you heard that you were having grandchild number 1 and everything that you had going on professionally and personally. And how did that make you react to hearing that news?
It was interesting for me because, again, it wasn't connected to it. I don't know that it became real until he was born, because up until that time, it was still something that was going to happen. And it was with our youngest daughter who had the first baby, and she was kind of daddy's girl, so I had a little bit deeper connection with her than I did my other daughters. And so I was very excited but really had no idea what it really meant because I wasn't, I didn't have grandparents, right?
Right.
As you know, no, I didn't know them anyway. And so I didn't live in that world of what to expect and what to do. So I was like, well, let's just see what happens. So I was excited. I was very excited for our daughter, and especially for my wife because she was she was very engaged around the process. And I was just more of a wait and see. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely, I think, hits grandmas different from grandfathers. I think I had a little bit of a same reaction where it was a little bit like, okay, this is a thing that's going to happen. It's going to come. And then, of course, the wife jumps in and is like over the moon. I want to know how every checkup's going. I want to know what your plans are
Right?
for this, that, and the other thing. And, but it's still so wonderful to have those kids and then hold them for the first time.
Yeah, definitely. That makes it real. As soon as you
Yeah.
see them, like, okay, they're here.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
And you had talked when we had talked a little bit before. You had told us about, or told me that you didn't really have that role model and that experience of having grandparents around as you were growing up. And so, I'm curious to know how you went about kind of figuring out how to do this grandfather role.
well, it's interesting because my family was certainly not the picture of what family life should be. Growing up in an abused environment and being in foster care and on the streets as a teenager and gangs and in jail by 19, single mom, grew up in a bit of an abusive area. And I didn't know either of my grandparents on either side. And so I knew what not to have. But being, sports saved my life. I played baseball in college, played sports heavy as a kid, and I started seeing a bit of family and tribe there, community, and then believe it or not, spending time in prison and in gangs, you start seeing a bit of what tribe can look like there too, because there's hierarchies and there's it takes a village perspective is it exists in nature because that's how God designed us. And so it happens in all kinds of structures, not just in the, genealogical family or however we're created. So you start seeing, you know what's missing and you know what people do and people play those roles. And so you're always playing some kind of a leadership guidance contribution role in somebody's world. Many times you may just not be aware of it. And so the more intentional we can be about that, the better. And that I've always just picked that up being in sales and in business as an entrepreneur. You start understanding how to influence people. And so much of that influence is really about how do I serve you? And if I can serve you, then I become useful to you. And if I'm useful to you, then I have a little bit of influence and say in your life. And it's, I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but parenting and grandparenting is very similar. If you make people feel important, make them feel understood. You don't come in telling them what you got to do, and you made this mistake, don't do that, or we did this way, you got to do it this way. We just observe, and we pour in, our wisdom more than anything. We pour in our love and everything that we can, and those are things that we do naturally as humans, unless something's dysfunctional that you don't know how. But most of us do it as a default. And because of my business, again, I spend a lot of time mentoring, coaching. We build environments like this. So we're pretty good at building environments that nurture people, support people, challenge people, and enable them to grow. So being able to do that for our kids and now for our grandkids, it's incredibly rewarding and humbling because it makes you realize, you can really screw things up too.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, because the other side of that coin is what you were describing, right? No relationship with the grandparents, involvement with gangs and other groups that probably weren't super positive, and somebody's going to step into that role if I think as a parent or as a grandparent you're not, and so I think that's important to remember is sometimes if you're thinking about sitting on your hands and you don't want to get involved, well, somebody else is going to get involved. And so it might as well
Yes.
be you.
And it's usually not what you want.
No, no. But I want to jump back a little bit and talk about your youth sports and talk about going through school. Were there any particular coaches that you even now still remember that had a real good impact on you?
Definitely. My biggest role models were my coaches, because those are the guys who, in that critical juncture in my life, I didn't really know that I was lovable. You know, when you grow up in an environment where you think your parents don't like you, they're the ones that are supposed to, right? So if they don't love you, then who would? So that was kind of my perspective. Like, well, they don't love me. I must not be lovable. And so I didn't show up in the world as a person who believed that I had value. And so you can imagine when the kind of choices and the things you do when that's the case. Because you know, if you don't respect yourself, you're not going to respect other people. So I lied, cheat, stole. I did a lot of things that I was kind of scorched earth the first 20 years of my life because I didn't care about anybody else. I cared about me. And so those coaches were the guys that were the ones that showed me love. They showed me that the more you contribute, the more reward you get, the more people appreciate you when you uplift the team. And, you know, it's not just about you. When you can contribute to make everybody else better, they all love you for it. So that was how that was my relationship with the world, was how do I do things to get back the validation and the significance that I needed to fulfill me. And so I started looking for those people. And it was just like, okay, if I make this coach happy, he's going to make sure that I get what I need. And, you know, as a kid, that was how I was negotiating life. But then also my sophomore year in high school, we had a team that won the section, NorCal section. And I got bounced off the team halfway through the year because I got an F in trigonometry. Don't take trigonometry. It's not, it'll kill you. But it cost me. It cost myself, of course. But our principal, I remember Mr. Sargent, he called me into his office, and he was a big baseball fan. Called me into his office, and man, he was talking to me, tears coming down his face about how brokenhearted he was and disappointed in the fact that he didn't get to see me step into something great. And that he was, you know, it wasn't about the baseball. It was about I was letting him down because he believed in me. And that this is a decision point, because you got to know that your life is not about you. Your life is about other people. And I'll never forget that with him, because I didn't even know that. I thought it was just, okay, I cost me. And he's like, no, you cost everybody, because everybody needs you to be the best you so that we can all be the best us. And you know, words of wisdom to a 14-year-old, I'll tell you that, you know.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think, too, that strikes at the heart of something that I like to talk about, which is in terms of as we become grandfathers, as you might end up going into retirement or whatever, finding these areas where you can take that mentorship and apply it to the youth around you. And it could be coaching a softball team. It could be coaching a soccer team. It could be doing a number of different activities, because we've got a perspective that can really help young people understand, to your point, that number one, we love you for what you can do and what you bring to the table, but it's about you. It's not necessarily about the skill or the team winning the championship or something. It's about Jim being the best Jim that
Right?
we have in the neighborhood.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, the interesting thing, I played baseball through college, played another 10 years of some adult leagues and semi-pro, played other things. And then when our youngest daughter, who was a world-class athlete, she started getting serious about sports, then I stopped playing, and we just started making, you know, our life centered around her travel instead of my travel. And then once she played into college in basketball, then I stopped. You know, we just kind of unplugged. I wasn't coaching, wasn't playing. We just kind of let it go. But then we started recognizing that kids are everywhere. They're not all playing sports. Some of them are just hanging out. Some of them are playing music. Some of them are, you know, some of them want to be entrepreneurs. Some of them are trying to figure things out. And no matter where they are, they can use support. and guidance. And so it's how can you be plugged into your neighborhood or your community, your church, in ways that other people know you're available to support,
Yeah.
because it's a big thing. And I know it's a little weirder now today than when we were kids, because if you hang around the playground, um, you're not going to get friendly looks.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
like, these are not your kids. What are you doing here?
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point, and it's something that I try to help people kind of understand what the situations are now. We need to protect the kids and all that, because you're right. We used to have the old guy that would stop off on his way to work and then help out the AAA baseball team because the guy had grandkids somewhere else, but he just liked getting out there. And so
Yeah.
he worked with the coach and was like, yeah, just come on by, help us out, hit some ground balls to the
Yeah.
kids.
Well, being a huge sports fan, and sports are so important to me, I love watching Little League games. I'm stunned at how talented some 10, 11, 12-year-old kids can be. And so, you know, my wife knows sometimes we'll be driving, like I'll just pull over and watch a game for a couple innings because it's fun. But, you got to be careful about that these days. But, actually an ambition of mine used to be years ago. I thought that when I retired, I would go drive a school bus so that I could drive the sports teams to their away games and just go watch games.
Yeah.
And, the only thing is now I don't know that I'm ever going to retire. So that might change.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a question for you, and that is now that you've been a grandfather for a little while, and I know you got 6 under 6, how do you think this role of grandfather is? What do you think this stage of your life, what's the purpose of that grandfather?
For me, it's been a bit of a wake up call, an opportunity to. It's not like I'm going to live through them, but it's an opportunity to contribute to our family and to our legacy in ways that maybe screwed up earlier. As a parent, the first time through, you're doing all this stuff wrong, and now we're like, okay, if I had to do over, I'd do this. Well, now you kind of got to do over a bit, so you can help support the kids in being the best version of themselves to treat the grandkids. But then it's how can we be the leader, the wise sage of the family that is ensuring legacy is happening, and that we can kind of see the gaps, and we say, okay, they need a little bit of spiritual nourishment here. And over here, they need just encouragement, because parents are parents. Our kids are drivers and they're super successful. And so they raise a high bar. They want their kids to be super successful. So sometimes we just step in and love on them. And then other times you can see when the parents are given like crazy love and all this extra favoritism or different things because they're parents and they're human. So then we'll step over here and we'll be like, okay, we'll hold a little bit more accountability and structure. And it's just an opportunity. That's where you see it takes a village, because before the times we live in now, people still live as a family in a village, 3 generations,
Yep.
4 generations together. So everybody was there to complete each other and fill in the gaps. It wasn't you're 18 and you're on your own.
Yeah.
So
No,
I think it's really about being aware of what is happening in the family dynamic, so that our wisdom and guidance and input can help, even if it's just being a role model. Sometimes we just show up in a way that allows our kids to step in differently, lean on us differently. And then the grandkids can look up to Nana and Papa as whatever they need us to be in the moment.
I love that. And I love the fact too that you were talking about, I think just showing up sometimes to the activities is huge, because I know kids kind of expect mom and dad are going to take them to the band recital, or mom and dad are going to show up for the baseball game. Grandpa and grandma don't necessarily have to do that, but when they show up,
Right?
it's like, ooh, I've got these people that show up and support me and love me no matter what. And
Yeah, it's so critical. They are just these receptacles for love, and they never seem to get full. They just, their parents love them, their friends love them. They love to make Nana and Papa happy. They love when we show up, And it's, they're still little. So I'm sure at some point they'll be like, what are you doing here today? But right now, every time they see us, they light up and they get excited and they see us a lot. I mean, we try to go to all their games. We got t-ball wrapping up. We got flag football happening. They jujitsu. They're doing stuff. Sometimes I think they might be doing more stuff than they need to, but we're there to support them. We're there to help our kids. Sometimes they need us. We'll take them to the game, or we'll take them to practice, or we moved to Nashville a couple of years ago because we were trying to get out of California's craziness and the political landscape. And our whole goal was to recruit our kids that way. We thought they would all come with, but they started buying homes and having babies. And next thing you know, we got 5 of them. So we moved back here last year, back to Sacramento from Nashville. And man, in certain areas, it's kind of challenging and frustrating because California is unrelenting. But being here, all of our kids, the furthest one is 20 miles away. Everybody's like within 10, 15 minutes. Impromptu drop-offs, come on over for dinner, the games, the practices. Hey, I got to work a double shift. Can you, and we're there. We're like, hey, we'll go get them. We'll take care of them. And our daughter was getting concerned because her husband had to work some extra shifts. And she's like, thank you guys for being there. I don't want to put you out. I'm like, dude, this is the reason we're here. This is the whole reason we came back. There is no putting us out. We're here.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because recently we were talking with our son, and they've got a 5 going on 6-year-old who's just a handful. Great kid, so don't get me wrong, but he's a 5 and 6-year-old little boy that's just full of energy. And talking with them, it's like, hey, do you need us to take him for a couple of weeks just so that you guys can just kind of take a breath? And it's important, I think, for parents both to raise their hands if you've got the grandparents around or something. Raise your hand every once in a while, folks, and say, hey, grandma, grandpa, can you take the kids for a little bit so we can just grab a breath? And then being able to do that, being able to set up your life and set up your lifestyle to be able to take that on, it goes back to your point of kind of takes a village to raise up these kids.
Yeah. And everybody's got a different dynamic. Some people are like, we don't need your help. We'll ask if we need it. And fortunately, our daughters are very close. They're all very close siblings. All of our grandkids are being raised almost like siblings because our daughters, almost every weekend there's, we're getting together for something. And so they spend a lot of time hanging out and play dates and doing stuff together. And so it's really nice that they're all so close in age and that they're all so connected and that we're all pretty involved in what's going on. One thing that we've recognized, and I thought for sure that when we became grandparents, I was convinced that we were going to be way overbearing. I was like, we're gonna be in the middle of everything, tell them when they're doing it wrong and all this stuff. Largely because I was kind of an overbearing father. That was my gig. I was overprotective. I just didn't want them. I messed up. So I had such a troubling childhood that I didn't want them to have those. So I was way overbearing in that stuff. And I'm super impressed with how we are handling. We don't tell them anything. They do stuff. We're like, that's interesting, and we just let them do it. And, every once in a while we might question something, but we're pretty hands off, except for just loving and supporting.
Well, that's great to be able to give them that space so that they can grow, so that they can make mistakes, so that they can learn, because that's part of the job,
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask you too, are there any activities that you're starting to do now, maybe with more of the older grandchildren, that you're laying the foundation for that relationship going forward?
Yeah. It's interesting because I worked very hard to try to create as much father-daughter relationship as I could with the 3 of them, and it didn't always work the way I would like. But I'm trying to make sure, some parents do like rituals. Like I remember I had a friend growing up who raised their kids. They all got the same thing. When they all turned 16, they got diamond earrings. When they all turned 12, they got this. And that was never my flavor. I was like, everybody's different. They'd each get their own thing. They get what they get when they get it. And I'm trying to make sure that each grandkid has the recognition that this is our thing because this is your thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to do it with you. And sometimes you're like, well, you tell, one of the grandkids, sometimes he gets a little protective of our time. So he'll come over and be like, well, Owen's our oldest one. And he'll be like, well, is Maverick coming over today? I'm like, not today. He's like, okay, so it's just you and me. I'm like, yeah, it's just you and me. But he loves his cousins. He loves hanging out with them. But there's times when he just wants to spend it with me. And then we'll go. There's this old arcade, which is it's batting cages and golf land and all that. And I used to go there when I was a kid. And now we go play games, me and Owen. So that's like his thing. That's the thing that we do together. And so I'm trying to keep it his and our thing. Although, it's not a bad thing if I bring the other grandkids at times to do it. But that's like him and I to do that thing. Took Maverick to he's a 4-year-old, and took him to the river last week, and we threw rocks and fed the ducks. And now it's like, I do that with Owen also, but I can see that's going to be a thing for Maverick. He really, really, really liked it. And more importantly, I think it was just our thing.
Yeah.
So it gave us an identity, something we could do together. And then our 3-year-old, he just turned 3 on Saturday. And I took him miniature golfing, indoor underground miniature golfing.
Oh, wow.
And it was kind of chaotic because he was trying to whack the ball like it was baseball, especially indoors. That was not good. But I could see that be something that we start doing a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
More thing. And I think it's important to have those things that you do, even if it's just a song.
Yeah.
Or maybe a cartoon or something you watch together, or a certain play. Like, my wife loves to paint and she's very crafty. I am absolutely not. And she'll go buy art projects, and then when they do art, they do it with Nana. So they'll go and paint and they'll create stuff. And so it's nice that they have their little compartments, because even the stuff that they might not do at home, but they always do it when they're here.
Yep. Yeah. That's absolutely huge, because when I'm talking with adult grandchildren and men and women, they oftentimes have that one thing that they did with grandpa. And it might be, oh, we always went and fished in the pond back by grandpa's farm, or this was kind of our thing, where a lot of conversations, and, not right now with the kids being so young, but as they start to head towards that upper end of elementary school and middle school, and you start having conversations about relationships, how do you manage this friend that's suddenly being mean to you, and different things like that becomes absolutely huge. So grandpa's everywhere, and grandparents, see if you can find that thing to do with the kids, and understand that thing is going to change as the kids evolve, and they have different interests. So
something else that I've started to do just recently, I've thought about it, like since Owen's been born. He's 5.5 now, but I open up a Gmail account in his name. And then instead of like writing a letter, think about this: after your grandfather dies, and then you get a note or some well thought out, loving letter that was like this moment in time, and that's got its own value and be immensely valuable. That's the kind of thing I never had, but I'm sure that guys who did would cherish. And I thought, I don't want to wait till then, because what if I miss that moment? And so what I'm doing now is I'm sending emails to the grandkids now, and it's just a moment in a snapshot. Hey, I just did this today. Or hey, guess what? We just went to the river today and threw rocks. It was so funny to watch you. Blah, blah, blah. And then somewhere down the road, when they're teenagers or when they're in their 30s or whatever, they're going to have this vault of, here's what Papa was thinking about me at this time, and then at that time, and then at that time. And some of those will be memories that they'll have, and others will be stuff they would have forgotten that we'll be able to share with them. But I just think it's kind of an interesting way for them to share my life with them now, so that they can enjoy it later.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before, but I'm absolutely loving it, because there's things that we'll oftentimes send to our friends, right? Or siblings or whatever, little funny things or little just thoughts. Happy birthday, sis. I'm thinking about you. Remember that time we did whatever. But then you start adding the grandkids into that mix, and they get that shot of you in your mid 50s. And oh, this is what grandpa thought was funny when he was 50. And now that he's 20 years on, here's, kind of they can compare and contrast and see that aging process and see that we were guys that loved sports and loved cars or whatever we're into. And we're sharing that with them at an early age.
Something else, an activity that I've taken on and largely inspired by the grandkids. I just turned 55 this year, and age has never meant anything to me. Aside from my 40th birthday, I can't think of any other number that was like massively big, except the double numbers. I like the 33s, the 44s, the 55s. I was 33 in all my sports and stuff, but 55 I've been thinking about for a few years, and like, what's going to be different about this? And I turned 55 a couple months ago, and before that, I made the decision that 55 is going to be best year ever for me. Oops, I think it's backwards, but best year ever. And I print it out, it's laminated, I see it every day, because best year ever for me is like best health, best wealth, best father, best husband, best grandpa, best, how do I do all of these things so that it's not about stuff that I'm doing, but I'm literally becoming a new person. I'm shifting my identity to become I aged to 55, and my goal is to start going backwards now and get, how do I'll double this so that I can get to another 55 without sacrificing and being everything that I can be for them. I had my wife and I did CrossFit, gosh, I don't know, 15 years ago together for a couple of years until it wrecked my shoulders and my knees and stuff. But the guy who ran our box, that's what they call the gyms in the CrossFit, he was this insane guy, super cool guy, Adam, but his unreal vision of himself. He said, I want to be in such great shape and such perfect strength that if I have to hang off of a cliff with one hand and my wife and children on the other hand, that I can do it, right? That was his unrealistic standard. This is what it means. If I can do that, then I can do anything else, but I believed he believed it also. And I think like that for me, I'm like, I want to be able to be anything I need to be. If I got to carry them, if I got to grab them, if I got to survive them, I want them to have every skill set, every tool set, everything that they can. They're going to know how to hunt, fish, shoot, pray, love, serve, give, earn revenue. They will be not dependent upon the world, but a resource to the world.
Yeah.
Right. I don't care what career they take. I don't care what kind of wife they have, as long as she's a good woman and all that kind of other stuff. But I want all of that. I want them to understand the importance of how they show up and serve the world and have no limitations on how they can do it.
Right. It's that discipline so that you've got the freedom of choices, that you're not limited and locked into something because of decisions or lifestyle or whatever that might be.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. Now, we talked a little bit too. How has your faith helped you in the role of being a grandfather, and how do you share that with the grandkids?
We are, our kids all know that my wife and I we're biblical, Jesus believing Christians. We roll with the Bible, and we don't beat it over people's head, but we don't hide it in any capacity. And part of us moving back to California, we told them that was going to be, instrumental. Said we plan on being a staple for God in their life, and all of our kids are good with that. They're all on their own journey in that area, but I pray with them. We'll sing, faith, worship songs. We get them biblical books, coloring books, stuff we'll read. They don't always understand. Sometimes they do. And sometimes, they're into it. Sometimes they always embrace what we're talking about. Sometimes they'll ask questions, and sometimes they'd rather just go color or go outside and throw rocks, whatever. But we keep it consistent. We want to make sure that we don't want to be, they're 18 and we didn't do anything about it. it's really important for us to be not just to introduce it to them and keep it there, but for us also for them to be consistently aware that they can see us and we want them to see something different. Like right now, right here on my desk, I have my Bible and my journal and a concordance. I was doing some Bible study a little bit ago, right? They know that when they come in here, they're going to see a Bible. They're going to see Nana reading her Bible. We're going to be praying. We're going to be doing stuff. We want them to understand that's who we are and that it's okay for them to be that too. We're not saying this is what you got to do. And it's not that. It's just we're trying to make it so clear and aware that for them it should be an obvious something that should be part of their life. Just like entrepreneurship and my lane. It's like everybody should be self-sufficient and be able to take care of themselves. And we want them to be that way too. Well, they'll be part of the family business. They'll always have a revenue generating capacity that is outside of whatever other kind of work they want to do.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. And I love the idea of, essentially inviting them into that by being, one, open, and two, not forcing it down their throats. But it's like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we're building our foundation. And you can find some of these same rewards out of building your own foundation with this.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah, I think it should be introduced to a point where until they're at a place where they're age of comprehension and decision, and they can intelligently or responsibly say, I don't want that right now. But they're not old enough to say that right now. So we have to make sure that it's constantly in front of them.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Have you started thinking more about the legacy you want to leave the grandchildren beyond financial? I think you talked a little bit about the entrepreneurship piece of it, but what other areas are you looking to build a legacy to leave with the grandchildren?
Well, excuse me. Fortunately, our kids have done a great job, so they don't have any need or want. So anything we do for them is going to be about their future and contributing there. And so one thing that we are going to do is we want to set up a business entity for the grandkids that we can start with and start getting them involved without making it some overbearing thing. One example is get a fireworks booth that the whole family can support, and all that revenue goes into the fund. And then we use that fund to buy a Christmas tree lot, and more of that revenue goes there. And then maybe we do a car washes and we open up a little lawn mowing business or whatever it's going to be. But all of those things just continue to grow, and all the kids will participate in it as they're old enough to do so that they'll recognize this is something that they get to earn, and they will understand the importance and the outcome of what that does for them. And that earning young also helps them build for the future and legacy. And then that, again, I have every expectation that they will have revenue that will be uncommon when they're in high school, because they'll just understand the laws and the rules of give and take and service. And, it's how it works. When you solve problems, people pay you for it. And there's problems that can be solved when you're 5, when you're 15, or when you're 50. And so it's just making sure that that's a default perspective in them. And we want to use that revenue to just continue to pour into their legacy. So we start that now. By the time they're, high school, graduate high school or college or whatever, they'll have money to buy a house. They'll have money to start a business, to contribute, to do what they want to do. We want them also to be part of a giving legacy, because my wife and I started doing something we call blessing bags, just simple stuff. Go buy, a few $100s worth of socks and snacks and toothbrush, something that homeless people might need on the street. And we put them into bags, throw them in the car. And then as we come across people who need them, we just hand them out. And, it went over so well when we did it. So now we're just making a regular, our goal is to do 1,000 of those, over this year. And then, then soon it'll be 1,000 a month, et cetera. But the kids were part of that. They put the bags together. When they're with us in the car, they'll be able to say, hey, yeah, there's somebody over there. And so we want it to be part of their DNA that it's about service and give back.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, and what I'm hearing too is there's a whole list of soft skills that go with that, right? It's the teaching them, whether it's the fireworks stand or the Christmas tree lot, whatever. It's that communication about getting the kids comfortable going up to an adult. Hey, what are you looking for? How are you doing these things? And starting to teach them those skills that they can take and use wherever they are. It's not just they get locked into something.
Yeah, it's definite. It's crazy because, I have this concept that we teach in sales training and business growth, that there's an inner game, an outer game, and an action component to every single thing you do. Weight loss, food, sales, auto mechanics. There's an inner game, which is, what do you believe about it? This is hard. This is challenging. This is stupid. I should never do this. Somebody else should do this. There's always a belief set you have. And then there's an outer game, which is the skill set that you have. And then there's the action component, like in what settings do you do this thing, right? So you have to know what do you think? How do you believe about it? You have to have a skill set that allows you to do it. And then you have to have the environment to be able to execute it in. And so that goes to everything. And so same thing, how do you serve people at a Christmas tree lot? How do you mow people's lawns? How do you walk somebody across the street? There's always that same thing. It's like, how do I show up? Who do I need to be to show these people that they matter? And so they see me as somebody who can help them get what they need.
Mm-hmm. No, I absolutely love that. And it's something that I'm hoping to be able to share that with my grandkids too, as they start to get older. Now, Jim, what piece of advice would you might have for new grandfathers?
Oh man, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because time is not promised to anybody. But for the most part, you got time. You got time. Don't try to do all of it now. Just observe, see where you're needed, see where you can be useful. You don't have to be everything all at once. Figure it out. That's what I would say. It's like just sit in and say, okay, where do they need my help? Where do they need my guidance? Where do they need my encouragement? And sometimes that's all it is. You just show up and encourage, and just look to be a force on how can I help make sure that the environment is winning. And that's part of the interesting piece, because we do a lot of events in our business. We train on a lot of events. And a lot of times it's a myriad of moving parts. And you can focus on the lighting, the sound, what's happening in the room, what's happening on stage. Or you can just focus on making sure that the environment has everything it needs to win. If you can make sure that everybody who shows up is happy, excited, prepared, fed, nourished, in the right spot, they'll do what they need to do. So sometimes that's all we try to do, is just how much love and support and anticipation can we inject into the soil.
Oh, I love that.
And as long as they're planted in the soil well, they'll get everything they need. So just read the room and recognize sometimes the only thing you need to do is show up and love, and don't do anything.
Oh, that's awesome. That's and the big thing that jumped out to me when you were saying that is perfection was not in any of that, in being perfect.
God, no. I wouldn't even know how to start with that. The feedback is always real, though.
Yep.
When you do things and your kids respond a certain way, then you know it's useful to them. When you do things and the grandkids respond a certain way, you know that it connected with them in the moment. So, your feedback will tell you a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. Jim, I have had you on for a little bit. I would like to give you an opportunity to talk to me a little bit about Gain the Edge and what you do with that training before we say goodbye.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Gain the Edge is a company that my wife and I own, and that have been in business we're on our 11th year now in this business model. And we help people build high revenue business models, and so they can scale their companies to a place of being viable. We help them become profitable, be viable by building systems, strategies, and structures in place. And we work real hard to get people to move from a world-class business to a best-in-class business to a class of one. Because when you're a class of one, you're unique, You are decommoditized. You are positioned very well in your network and what you do, and people know who you are, and you become very interesting, and that's when you start becoming viable. So that's what we do. We help build sales systems, strategies, and teams, and scale companies to exponential growth.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. And Jim, if people wanted to reach out to you, find out a little bit more about Gain the Edge, or just get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can go to, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually drop this in. I'll give you my Facebook and LinkedIn. You can put in the show notes, but I'm going to drop in my cell phone number as well. Because if somebody wants to reach out, I'm happy to help. I get really excited about people trying to grow their business, trying to make a bigger imprint on the world, because we stand for entrepreneurs being the leading force for change in the world. Because we know that Washington isn't going to save us. We know that Wall Street's not going to save us. What's going to make the biggest impact in the world for our grandkids and their grandkids is entrepreneurs, your neighbor next door, people showing up as the best possible version of ourselves, being profitable and self-reliant so that you can create your own economy and change the world for those around you. And I would love to help in any way that I can, either through my brain or my connections to help you out. And so I'll give you my cell phone number directly. It's 916-587-1946. And that'll be in the show notes for you as well. Don't hesitate. Reach out. Tell me you heard on the podcast, and I'd love to see what you're up to and how we might be able to help you.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we will have all that in the show notes so people can easily find it and get in contact with you. And Jim, thanks again for being on the Cool Grandpa podcast. This has been a fabulous conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Great concept, great podcast. I love what you're doing, and can't wait to share it with people.
Thanks. Man, it was great having that conversation with Jim. I really did enjoy him being open and honest about the background that he had growing up and the challenges that he had to really address and overcome in order to set himself and his family up on a really awesome path. I love the idea that Jim shared with us about setting up these Gmail accounts for our grandchildren and being able to send them emails that's close to real time that they'll be able to read and understand when they get to be teenagers or young adults, and really be able to know that grandma and grandpa were thinking about them, that we're sharing maybe some funny memes with the kids, that we're maybe having a moment of reflection about a visit and a time together that they had. So that's one of the big takeaways that I've had. What are some of the takeaways that you had with this conversation with Jim? I'd love to hear about it. So please put it in the comments below, as well as, shoot me an email. Let me know what your thoughts were. And that's at greg@cool-grandpa.com is the email address. So be sure to check out the show notes. I've got a lot of links to what Jim was talking about, as well as links to Grandparents Week that you can use to sign up. So, hey, until next time, remember to stay cool.